Ready to roll?
Great.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. We want to welcome you to the second workshop for our periodic evaluation of the GSP of the Santa Clara River Valley East Groundwater Subbasin. This workshop is part of a series of meetings being held here at the SCV-GSA, which is a part of the state-required periodic evaluation of the Groundwater Sustainability Plan. Whether you joined us for the first workshop or barely starting today, we want to thank you for your time tonight, and we appreciate you being here. So we're going to quickly just go over how to engage in tonight's workshop. This is a hybrid workshop. We do have someone here from the public, and then we do have a couple people online. So before we get started, just some housekeeping. We will be presenting for about an hour with 30 minutes of Q&A at the end. Please enter your questions into the chat or the Q&A box online. And if you have questions after tonight's workshop, please email scvgsa@scvwa.org. If you have questions in person, do you want them to ask them as we go or take for the end?
We have a question spot. We have a couple question breaks in the PowerPoint.
Okay. Thank you for answering that. All right, and then tonight's workshop is divided into 5 parts, where we will cover a welcome, introduction of the team, an overview. We'll cover potential use of domestic wells in water quality. A discussion of water quality topics include salt, nutrients, and contaminants. The whole room is a microphone, so everything in here is being projected. EWR's recommended corrective actions regarding water quality, and a closing section on how the public can participate. So I'm going to go over through our welcome. The purpose of tonight's workshop is we're conducting this meeting and other workshops related to the state required periodic evaluation to inform the public about the current groundwater basin sustainability needed clarifications to the GSP, and to obtain input from the public. Tonight's workshop will cover DWR recommended corrective actions, including or regarding water quality and the discussion of 2 other related items regarding domestic wells, salts, and nutrients. So just very briefly for introductions, we'll go ahead and introduce the SCV Water team, and then we'll have the entire team come on, turn your camera on, and you can turn your microphone on as we go through this list. So just very briefly, I'm Laura Gallegos. I am the Senior Communications Specialist, and I'm assisting the SCV-GSA team here. So.
Hi, everybody. Rick Goose with SCV Water.
Hi, everyone. Safra Alam, Senior Water Resource Planner from SCV Water.
Heather Hatch with Intera.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Trevor Jones with Intera.
Good evening. I am John Porcello with GSI Water Solutions.
Good evening. I'm Katie Evans with Woodard & Kern, and I'm here to help with facilitating stakeholder engagement.
So now that you've met the team, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Rick to take over and guide us through the next section.
Great, thanks, Laura. Hi, everybody. So we have a hybrid presentation tonight. I'll speak some. The team from Intera will speak some, and John Porcello will speak some. So you'll be listening to a few of us tonight. I'm going to cover some background sections. Let's see here. Okay. So the Groundwater Sustainability Plan was adopted by the local water agency here, the Santa Cruz Valley Groundwater Sustainability Agency, in 2022. That is almost 5 years ago, and the state's regulations require we update the plan every 5 years, so we're in this process to update it by January 2027. The process is called a periodic evaluation, and tonight we're going to focus on DWR comments and a needed clarification and a recommended corrective action. So in 2022, after the Groundwater Sustainability Agency adopted the plan, it was submitted to the Department of Water Resources. 2 years later, they approved it. And in their approval, they asked us to clarify some things, and they included some recommended corrective actions. So we're going to talk about a couple of those tonight. So the first thing we'll sort of start with the easier parts and move to the more complex parts. So we'll just jump right into it here. We'll start with domestic wells and salts and nutrients, and then we'll move into water quality. If you were at the first workshop, you heard us talk about the Department of Water Resources comments about having us work more to get individual domestic well users engaged and perhaps allowing us to sample their domestic wells. So we've been working on that. We've looked into that because we have some data gaps in the basin. We have certain wells towards the central part of the basin where we monitor and have water quality, but we don't have wells in the more distant parts of the basin to collect water quality samples from. The available wells for that are primarily domestic wells. So that's why we're looking into this. And the next slide identifies some of the outreach that we've done. Those green, blobs on the map are areas where we've sought to find domestic well owners to just communicate with them and see if they'd be interested in allowing the Groundwater Sustainability Agency to collect groundwater samples from their wells. We've done a lot of outreach. We haven't had any people step forward yet to volunteer, but we'll continue to do that. We're also going to update our website so people can log on to the website and understand more about what the volunteer monitoring program would be. But essentially, we would work with, or we would communicate with the potential volunteer, answer their questions, and determine if their well would be a good fit for this program. Then we'd have an agreement with them, and we would go out to their property, when they tell us it's okay, collect a groundwater sample, and then analyze it and share that information back with them. So for well owners that haven't had their groundwater well sampled in a long time, this might be something that they find interesting. So we're open to suggestions on this. So that wraps up that first part. Should we open it up? Are there any questions? Katie, how would you like to facilitate
Yeah, that's a great way to do it. Right now, it doesn't look like we have any questions. Do you have any questions?
I understand the reluctance on folks with having someone poke in our wells, but I wonder, have you considered paying them for access?
The concept has come up. We felt it as the Santa Cruz Valley Groundwater Sustainability Agency, being a public agency, it might not be appropriate to pay people for that, but we could dig into that. But it's a good point. It's a good point. Just paying for the water quality analysis may not be enough for people to help us. All right. If there's nothing else, we'll keep on trucking. That's okay. All right. Okay, this next part, John Porcello from GSI Water Solutions is going to walk us through. And with that, John, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Rick, and hello, everyone. So what this topic is about is salts and nutrients in groundwater. And what we're going to talk about is that the GSA team has identified some things about the way salts and nutrients are addressed in the GSP that we're going to clarify as we go through this periodic evaluation process. What you see here, and I think we need to, there we go. We're going to talk tonight about 5 different types of undesirable results that are described in the GSP that pertain to groundwater quality. This topic of salts and nutrients is the fourth one with the arrow that you see there. And basically, with respect to this topic, an undesirable result would occur if groundwater pumping were to cause concentrations of certain naturally occurring constituents, salts as reflected by total dissolved solids, chloride, as well as nitrate and sulfate, to exceed certain standards for water quality that have been established in the basin. We'll talk a little bit more about this 2016 SNMP document that does that, and is considered in the GSP. So it's partly about that, and it's partly about making sure that we don't get in a situation that puts new state permits for the use and distribution of recycled water at risk. So that's what the undesirable result is that pertains to salt and nutrients, is to make sure those things don't happen. Next slide. So before we dig into a bunch of details, I just want to go over a couple of concepts about what we're talking about here. So the first concept is, why would we be monitoring for salts and nutrients in the first place? And the big reason for that is that the state of California actually requires that kind of monitoring in basins around the state. And they require this, and they require the establishment of what are called salt and nutrient management plans, with the whole goal of trying to encourage the use of recycled water. With the encouragement of using recycled water, part of what the state has long been thinking about is making sure that groundwater quality does not get degraded as recycled water use increases in a basin. And so as part of that process, basins have gone and developed salt and nutrient management plans, and those plans revolve in part around water quality objectives for salts and nutrients that the state establishes. And they establish that through their regional water quality control board. So in this case, the Los Angeles Regional Water Quality Control Board has established objectives here in this groundwater basin. And so again, the whole thought here is we want to make sure that increases in salts and nutrients, are not occurring, and that we don't have water quality degradation occurring. So that's the spirit of what the salt and nutrient management program is about. So the GSA, what it did when the GSP was developed was it created a certain part of the groundwater monitoring program for the basin to revolve around this salt and nutrient monitoring program. So the GSA created the monitoring to monitor for undesirable results, and it relies on the existing state required salt and nutrient management plan discussed above. Next slide. So couple of basic things here. What are salts and nutrients? Well, salts, to start with those, are minerals in the water. So sodium, magnesium, potassium chloride, and other naturally occurring salt minerals that are common in geologic materials and in water. The nutrients are limited to nitrogen compounds for the most part. So the focus on those are compounds such as nitrate, nitrite, and ammonia. That in this salt and nutrient program, phosphorus and potassium also get some consideration, but it largely revolves around nitrogen, which is kind of the leading indicator for nutrient concentrations in groundwater. So for both the salts and the nutrients, these are found naturally in groundwater systems, but of course they can be added to groundwater through land uses. For example, agricultural use of lands, septic systems can add salts and nutrients to the groundwater, and recycled water use potentially can do the same thing. So that's what we're talking about in terms of what the salts and nutrients themselves are. Um, In the basin, groundwater from several wells are analyzed for salts and nutrients. And what we're finding as monitoring continues is that the concentrations generally are below those state water quality objectives across the basin, though we do have a few wells where we do see some isolated exceedances. We'll show you on the next slide. And so, of course, the question becomes, are these isolated exceedances a concern, both with respect to, the objectives of the salt nutrient program and the objectives of the GSP? So this is that map I mentioned. What you're looking at here, the various pinkish, orange, green colors, the dark blue, those are all the different parts of the alluvial aquifer that have been identified as management zones for the salt nutrient management program. So there are water quality objectives in those 5 different zones that you see. That lighter blue color is for a 6th management zone that represents the Saugus Formation, that deeper groundwater system. The state has not established water quality objectives for that system. They've just established them in these other areas where the alluvial aquifer is present and the water table is closer to the ground surface. So that's the focus of what this program talks about. And you'll see the dots on the map are the locations of where samples are being collected. The green dots show places where we've not exceeded the water quality objectives, or in GSP speak, it's the minimum threshold concentrations. We do have a few places, though, where we have exceeded those, and those are in the yellow dots. If you look carefully, you'll see that most of them are over at the western end of that kind of darker purple area on the east side of the basin. So they're pretty localized. And in fact, when the salt and nutrient plan was being put together, actually even a little bit, more in that area. When they put that plan together in 2016, they actually took the dark purple area and subdivided it so that from a management perspective, they basically defined a zone 1A and a zone 1B. And the reason for that was that the natural geology there is such that it appears that there's just higher naturally occurring salts in that one small area, and not something related to human uses of water, groundwater pumping, recycled water use. And then just the last thing I wanted to point out was the black dots on the map are places where monitoring has begun in recent years, and we don't quite have enough data yet to do the quantitative and statistical analyses that are required to evaluate an exceedance. But we'll be getting there in the next few years. Next slide. So in terms of the GSP and the sustainable management criteria, we are thinking about a few changes to the sustainable management criteria that basically come out of the fact that since the GSP was completed in early 2022, we've now had about 4 years or so of working with the data sets and thinking about what the data might tell us about undesirable results. And what we've noticed is that in some of those wells that we show with the yellow dots, the math suggests that there is maybe technically an exceedance numerically that's happening at those wells. But when you look at the context of what concentration trends are, or, they're occurring in one part of the basin, but really not occurring over much of the basin, that leads us to think that we have to make some revisions that kind of better reflect the actual conditions we're seeing in the basin as we continue monitoring. So we have locations of wells in certain zones that are exceeding water quality objectives and suggesting a localized water quality condition. but it's really reflecting naturally occurring salts rather than a regional water quality problem. So we're in the middle of taking another look at this. We're going to better explain this in the periodic evaluation, and particularly in terms of, how what we do with the sustainable management criteria tie in directly to the question of whether an undesirable result is occurring and has been identified. So we're under study at this time, figuring out what we want that process and procedure to look like. So I think that's everything we have on this topic. Are there any questions?
Never mind.
Okay.
Thank you, John. Okay, I'm gonna introduce a couple things here and then we'll keep on moving. Laura, can you advance the slide for me? Oh, there we go. So we're moving into part 4. Now we're going to talk about water quality, and we're going to get into the specific recommended corrective actions from the Department of Water Resources. So the first part has to do with agricultural wells. So in quotations, these first full bullets, these were the comments from the Department of Water Resources to the Groundwater Sustainability Agency. I'll pause, you can read them. So the state would like to know if our Groundwater Sustainability Agency has a plan to use agricultural wells to monitor groundwater quality in general, like salts and nutrients, like John mentioned, but also contaminants. We are going to look at this. Our approach is listed down below. For context, the state of California is may not realize that we do not have much agriculture here in Santa Clarita. We have some in the western part of the valley, or the western part of the basin. So we're going to look at DWR's comments. We'll evaluate the need to fill potential data gaps. Like the domestic wells in the canyon areas, we need well owners to agree to let us come out to their property and collect water samples. So what we'll do is we'll look in these areas, see if there are potentially other wells that can better be accessed, and focus our effort on areas where there are data gaps. So we'll work through this. If we see data gaps, we'll look at agricultural wells too, to see if they could work. And then we'd communicate with agricultural well owners to see if there could be an option for that. So that's our plan to address this. So that's also under study. So I just wanted stakeholders to know that that's what's happening here. Are there any questions on that? No. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to introduce a couple concepts with basin groundwater quality with contaminants, and then I'm going to turn it over to the team from Interra. So this is the continued part of part 4, the second block of recommended corrective actions from the Department of Water Resources. So just at a high level, when we talk about groundwater quality in the basin, we often refer to these as constituents of concern when we're talking about things that are not naturally occurring, like contamination, perchlorate, volatile organic compounds, or even emerging chemicals like PFAS. I'm sure many of you have heard of PFAS. So these are constituents of concern. It's not unique to Santa Clarita. They are chemicals in the groundwater, unfortunately, are present all throughout California and through the nation. The good news is there are treatment technologies available for most of them, but it is something that has to be managed. So it's not unique to Santa Clarita. We have a very robust monitoring system here. We monitor our municipal wells every 5 years for what's called the unregulated contaminant monitoring rule. We test some wells more frequently, and then there's also specialized monitoring wells in the valley, including some that are managed or monitored in cooperation with the Whitaker-Burmite team as part of state required monitoring plans. So we know a lot about groundwater quality. There are data gaps with groundwater quality. Nevertheless, though, the Department of Water Resources wants us to sharpen our pencil on this a little bit. So we're looking at monitoring, or the groundwater monitoring has identified perchlorate and VOCs in both the shallow and deep groundwater. We're also finding PFAS in the alluvial wells. Perchlorate was detected way back in 1997. Since then, we found volatile organic compounds, abbreviated as TCE and PCE on your screen here, and then PFAS. All of these chemicals are regulated in one degree, or regulated one degree or another by different state agencies. The Division of Drinking Water, the Department of Toxic Substances Control, the Regional Water Quality Control Board, and possibly other state agencies. Our groundwater sustainability plan that was approved by the Department of Water Resources said we didn't develop minimum thresholds for contaminants, largely because these were already heavily regulated by other state agencies. And the groundwater sustainability agencies have less authority, and we didn't want to create yet another administrative layer that people would have to work in when the state agency was really the one with the responsibility and authority to regulate these. Nevertheless, the Department of Water Resources wants us to establish some values. Furthermore, the approved groundwater sustainability plan seeks to avoid increases in groundwater contamination caused by groundwater pumping. So real quick, talking about PFAS. PFAS is what's called an emerging contaminant. We have installed, SCV-Water has installed treatment systems on municipal wells to address it. But unlike perchlorate and VOCs, there are no state maximum contaminant levels yet for PFAS. We're treating it to the state's response level at this point. The federal MCL does not require compliance until 2029. So SCV-Water is being proactive in treating it, but the investigation about PFAS is still being conducted, data is still being collected, etc. Regarding perchlorate and volatile organic compounds, Whitaker-Burmite is a known source area for these. The perchlorate and VOCs historically used or deposited on that property have moved downstream, have entered the groundwater system, they've moved downstream and come around municipal wells, and that has caused municipal wells to be contaminated. As I mentioned earlier, that was discovered in the late 1990s. Since then, a lot has happened. Some wells had to be destroyed. A water treatment system was added to treat water from the Saugus 1 and Saugus 2 wells to remove perchlorate. More treatment systems have been added since, and some other new wells have been installed. When groundwater wells become contaminated, there's a long process to get them restored back up and running. I mentioned a number of state agencies are involved. So restoring these municipal wells following, say, perchlorate and VOC contamination is a complex process. The state's Division of Drinking Water has its own process, which can take a long time. The state's Department of Toxic Substances Control also coordinates with SCV-Water regarding the use of its municipal wells, which are fitted with perchlorate and VOC treatment. In that approach, SCV-Water is helping to remove some of the perchlorate mass and VOC mass in the groundwater system. And in doing that, it's able to restore operation of its production wells. But we have to do that within a DTSC approved plan called an interim remedial action plan. Right now, there are 6 wells included in that DTSC plan. They're listed on the screen below, and they're also shown in this map. The Whitaker-Burmite property is on the right. The municipal wells that have been affected by perchlorate and VOC are on the left. The blue arrow is the approximate direction of groundwater flow. So these wells with the yellow circles on them are within the perchlorate plume, and they have treatment systems on them to address perchlorate and or volatile organic compounds. And these are the ones that are included in the state's Department of Toxic Substances Control interim remedial action plan. We show this slide because we want stakeholders to know that this is taking place, this has been taking place for a very long time under various state approvals. We do not plan to set new thresholds for these wells in the groundwater sustainability plan because we already know they're contaminated and we already have a way to address the contamination. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the Intera team to walk through some of the technical details about what our next steps are responding to this recommended corrective action. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Rick. And good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Trevor Jones, and I really want to build off of the nice history that Rick has laid out in terms of what contaminants of concern exist in the basin, how they've historically been managed, and bring this into the framework of what does this mean for the GSP specifically as part of this periodic evaluation. As Rick mentioned and teed up and John touched on as well, the approved GSP did include recommended corrective actions from the Department of Water Resources, specifically for management of contaminant concentrations in the basin. That recommended corrective action is shown here on this upper bullet in quotes. And if we're going to summarize what the recommended corrective action describes, is DWR is asking the GSA to take the next step from defining what's considered undesirable to quantifying when those conditions will occur. For the periodic evaluation, what that means is establishing a network of wells that will be monitored for contaminant concentrations, establishing actionable minimum thresholds, measurable objectives, and interim milestones, and then defining conditions under which those management criteria would be exceeded that would be representative of undesirable results for degraded water quality. We're going to walk through a few slides that demonstrate this whole process, but what this means for the GSP itself is that through this periodic evaluation, the GSA will be establishing sustainable management criteria for perchlorate and for VOCs specifically. Now, importantly, as has been touched on both in the last workshop and in this workshop, these sustainable management criteria will be evaluated throughout the GSP implementation process, as is encouraged under STIGMA. So every 5 years, as part of the subsequent periodic evaluations, the GSA will evaluate whether or not the management criteria that will be established through this periodic evaluation continue to remain protective of water supplies and degraded water quality within the basin. We jump to the next slide. We want to start to tee up what it looks like to actually develop sustainable management criteria for degraded water quality as it pertains to contaminants. So this graphic we have on the slide provides a high-level overview of the different processes that are going to be discussed and taken through the periodic evaluation to both comprehensively respond to DWR's recommended corrective action and establish management criteria that are protective of water supplies in the basin. This cycle of establishing sustainable management criteria really is a holistic process that starts with defining what would be considered undesirable, and then from there, defining where those conditions will be monitored, the criteria against which those conditions will be managed, and then the conditions under which exceedances in those criteria would be representative of a basin-wide undesirable result. So in the next few slides, we're going to walk through each of these boxes to kind of discuss how they all tie together and present the GSA's current thinking on an approach to establish sustainable management criteria for degraded water quality. can we jump to the next slide here? And then before we get into, yeah, that'd be great. If we can jump through maybe the next 4 arrows. Yeah. Before we get to the comprehensive response to DWR's recommended corrective action, like John, when he presented the discussion on the salt and nutrient management plan, salt and nutrient concentrations, we want to pause on what's already included in the approved GSP for an undesirable result related to contaminants. As John mentioned, there's 5 different criteria or conditions that would be representative of undesirable results in the basin related to degraded water quality. 4 of those criteria, which are highlighted here with these arrows, are specifically related to contaminant concentrations. And rather than read through each of these 4 bullets, I'm going to summarize, and largely what they are designed to protect is ongoing groundwater supplies for both private, domestic, agricultural, and municipal uses. And they're also designed to protect ongoing remediation activities that are underway to address contamination in the basin. So importantly, before we move on, we want to emphasize DWR did not ask the GSA to revise this definition. What DWR asked was for the GSA to take this definition and quantify conditions under which they're likely to occur. So what you'll see in the periodic evaluation is a definition of undesirable results that's consistent with the GSP, and then a couple of sets of monitoring networks and management criteria that build off this definition. If we jump to the next slide. So in that kind of circular framework we presented a few slides ago, that upper box represents what's defined as an undesirable result. The next step in the process is defining where those contaminant concentrations will be monitored throughout the basin. This map is designed to provide a sense of groundwater production throughout the basin itself. As I mentioned, when summarizing the definition of an undesirable result, a lot of it centers on protecting groundwater supplies for the future. And this map shows a network of groundwater production wells in both the alluvial aquifer and the deeper Saugus Formation. In this map, every one of these circular symbols represents a groundwater production well. The symbols that are contain the little bullseye in the center represent wells that pump from the alluvial aquifer, and the solid circular symbols represent groundwater production wells that pump from the Saugus Formation. And these wells are color-coded by historical perchlorate exceedance conditions. The wells shown in orange, which are all located down gradient of the Whitaker Bermite facility, shown in gray, have had regulatory exceedances for perchlorate. Everything shown in green have not had historical regulatory exceedances. So again, when we think back to the definition of an undesirable result, the conditions in wells and water quality that we would be aiming to protect specifically under the GSP would be production from these green wells. On top of this, we've included this generalized groundwater flow direction to really inform, if you go to the next slide, the types of wells that are being considered to be included in the representative monitoring network for contaminants. So again, what is being considered here for representative monitoring sites are production wells, where the GSA would monitor specific contaminant concentrations over time. The criteria that are used are being considered to develop this network are shown here in these checkmark bulleted items, where first and foremost, the representative monitoring sites are going to consist of production wells. This is tied directly back to that definition of an undesirable result, where contamination would impact groundwater supplies. The most direct way to measure that is to measure concentrations within production wells. The second criteria that's being considered is the history of regulatory exceedances at each of these wells. So in addition to the well being a production well, one of the criteria is also that there have been no regulatory exceedances in the past at the well. The generalized groundwater flow direction arrow is just designed to demonstrate that the wells in consideration for the representative monitoring site would be located down gradient of known contamination. and the wells would span across both the alluvial aquifer and deeper Saugus formation. So given these factors, the GSA is currently evaluating suitable sites to include in the representative monitoring network for contaminants. What we show here is very much just some example locations, and the actual locations will be presented at a later time in the periodic evaluation itself. We jump to the next slide. What we've walked through is what's defined already as an undesirable result in the GSP. The approach to defining a network of wells that will be used to monitor those conditions. And then the next stop on the sustainable management framework is developing criteria that will be used to characterize whether or not undesirable results will be occurring in the basin. The approach that's proposed for sustainable management criteria for contaminants is really based off of guidelines in the GSP emergency regulations, which state that minimum thresholds can be either concentrations of contaminants in wells or a number of supply wells that would be impacted by contaminants over time. This latter option is what we're proposing to use and integrate into the GSP through this periodic evaluation. So the minimum thresholds, or those conditions that we want to avoid, would be one or more additional production well in the basin that exceeds regulatory thresholds for perchlorate or VOCs. What this means pragmatically is contaminant concentrations will be measured in production wells. The minimum threshold would be an MCL exceedance in one of those production wells. What this represents is the potential onset for that loss of water supply that's considered an undesirable result already in the GSP. On the flip side, the conditions that we want to operate in or operate under in the GSP would be the measurable objective, or 0 additional production wells with regulatory exceedances in the future. So if we think back to that map that showed the orange and green dots, we want to keep the orange dots where they are, and we don't want to see that expanding over time. How this will be measured and evaluated through implementation is by considering the water quality impacts that the impacts that water quality will have on the ability to meet anticipated demands in the basin, which are specified in the urban water management plan. So the minimum threshold provides that lower bound of conditions we don't want to get into. The measurable objective represents where the basin is designed to operate, and the path and progress towards meeting that measurable objective will be evaluated through implementation by looking at the ability to meet anticipated demands in the basin. As Rick mentioned, we do also want to call out that sustainable management criteria are not being proposed for wells that are already managed under the interim remedial action plan. So those are those 6 wells Rick showed on the map a few slides ago. Those wells have had historical perchlorate exceedances and are being treated separately and uniquely by in the basin already. So measurable objectives and minimum thresholds are not going to be proposed for those wells. If we move to the next slide, to wrap up this sustainable management criteria process, we have an undesirable result. We have a network of wells we'll be monitoring. We have a potential approach to defining sustainable management criteria. And then we need to define how many of those minimum threshold exceedances would be representative of that undesirable result that's defined all the way at the beginning. That definition is baked into the definition of the minimum threshold. An undesirable result in the basin would occur if one or more minimum thresholds were exceeded in the basin. And what this means, again, from a tangible standpoint, would be a production well being shut down due to a regulatory exceedance in the future. Now, importantly, on top of all of this is the question of what happens if an undesirable result occurs. And the plan that we'll be integrating into the periodic evaluation is that the SCV-GSA or one of its member agencies, on behalf of the GSA, will notify the Department of Toxic Substances Control to seek engagement and get their direction and evaluation of cleanup by the responsible party to protect the production well or wells. So What this means is that an exceedance of the minimum threshold would initiate some ongoing coordination to address the contamination. And then if we jump to the next slide, I believe this is our last one. Yeah, just to wrap up this circle, I've spent a lot of time talking. There's been a lot of information. But if we were to just look at what's being proposed for the periodic evaluation now, the definition of an undesirable result is going to be the same as what's in the GSP. Again, DWR did not ask the GSA to revise that definition. What they asked the GSA to do is define the three boxes in the bottom half of this circle. So the undesirable results will be the same. A network of production wells will be used to define representative monitoring sites. The management criteria used to evaluate the onset of undesirable results will be based on regulatory thresholds, and conditions that would be representative of an undesirable result in the basin would be one or more additional wells exceeding regulatory thresholds in the future. And with that, I believe we are about time to answer some questions. I'm going to pass it over to Katie.
Okay, no questions online. Nothing here in house. So thank you, everybody. Katie's gonna walk through a couple things next here. Laura, can you advance the slide, please?
So we're gonna do an online engagement activity to try to get some feedback in a way that might be meaningful for us to get some insights from you. We're gonna use an online tool. We also have an opportunity for using it in the room. Laura is gonna put a link in the chat. If you are online, you can either click that link, you can go to menti.com and type in the code that you see on your screen there, or you can scan the QR code and participate from your phone. In the room, you can scan the QR code, or we also have the same questions up here, and you can engage with us this way. So when you do that, it's going to open up a new screen for you, and you should see something that says workshop 2. So Laura, I think you can probably jump over to that. No problem. And while she's doing that, I just want to say that you will be able to see the results, but they will be anonymous. So for example, if someone tells us that they live outside of the area, you will be able to see that somebody did, but you won't be able to see who. So you have some anonymity in asking these questions. So the first question we're asking, kind of because we want to know, but also as practice for using this tool, if you could start with, what part of the basin do you live? And if you want to use, we've got the same questions up here, you can check them, or you can just talk to us.
I left my Android in the car.
Okay, great. Well, you're welcome to just chat with us as we go. So I'm seeing that we've got 10 people logged in to Menti, great. And we're starting to see some answers come in. So we'll give you just a minute to answer this first question. And get logged in if you're still doing that.
I'm glad to give the information.
Sure.
We can put it in.
I'll check your, would you like to ban away for us and check the box? That'll be fun.
Okay, question 1. Valencia.
Great. Okay, so it looks like we've got 11 people logged in and 3 have answered. So if you are having any trouble answering the question, please send us a message in the chat and we can try to support you. Because if you're logging in and not answering, let me just check the chat. You can only see this part of the chat. Okay. Okay, there we go. Now we're starting to see them in. Great.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Wondering if there are people, is it our consulting team that logged in that isn't answering? Because that's less than half.
I thought there was one Valencia before we put it in there.
There is, yeah. Are we seeing any?
No, but I can ask you to submit his if you'd like.
Oh, yeah, that would be great. Thank you. Okay. Anybody having any trouble with Menti? That looks like we're good. Okay, getting some thumbs up.
Okay.
All right, so that looks good. If you're having trouble, this was the test. So please put something in the chat if you need more. I think we can go ahead and move to the next question. Yeah, so the next question is, are you a private well owner? Did you enter that thing? Okay, so he said no, so you can.
No, I'm ready.
Oh, okay, well, we're gonna have both, because now he's showing up in here, so. Okay, looks like no private well owners so far.
Number 6.
Yeah, I think so. 6 answers, all right.
Terrific.
Okay, well, hopefully you know some private well owners or you have some ideas about that. So we are not surprised to see that everybody answered no to that question because we are having a lot of trouble reaching private well owners. As you heard earlier, we've sent some letters out to folks and we haven't been getting a lot of response. So if anyone has any ideas or thoughts on how we might best reach private well owners, we would love for you to type those in and they'll show up as comments. So go ahead if you have an idea. Any idea?
I was just thinking, the fire department requires well owners to keep a certain amount available for firefighting.
Okay.
I wonder if that's protected information, or you can go to the fire department, because they have a list, they check who those people are.
Okay, so fire department workers, okay,
That's a great idea.
So,
yeah,
I'm writing fire department, may have information.
Yeah.
perfect.
LA County Fire Department.
So I see on here we have a great idea of contact well owners association. So I was not aware that there is a well owners association. But that's great to know.
Well, they used to meet at the Saugus Cafe.
The idea of a water testing event is interesting though, and community champions. And I'll be honest, we're trying to turn all of you right now into community champions to help us with this. So love that suggestion. Yeah, great. Okay. That's probably all the ideas for now, but we're very open to additional ideas in the future. So if you ever want to share something with us, please do shoot us an email. Okay, you heard a little bit about our interest in incentivizing well owners to participate in monitoring programs. And our hope here was that by paying for and facilitating water quality testing on their behalf and then providing them the data, because they very likely don't have that, that would be an incentive to get well owners to voluntarily participate in monitoring programs with us. But we are very open to other ideas. We heard one earlier today, which is compensate them. Are there other ideas, potentially ways we think we might get well owners to participate with us in the best interest of sustaining the groundwater basin? So pause a minute for any ideas on that. Yeah, I think that would be great.
Self-incentive.
Emphasize upfront that they will not be subjected to a pumping tax or fee. Okay, that's a really great comment. So potentially making sure that they're not concerned about participating having negative consequences ensure privacy, gift cards, water quality education. Yeah, I can certainly see privacy being something of concern to folks, so that's a great suggestion, gift cards as incentives, and water quality education. Great. I'll throw this out there, and somebody can either comment or feel free to put something in the chat, but something that's sort of on my mind, or has been on my mind today as we've been talking about this, is that it may be really helping them to understand the importance of this data, right? And helping private well owners, because how would they know if we don't go tell them, right? How important this data is to sustainable management of our groundwater basin. So I think there is some, I think that's water quality education, that comment there, but I think that could be very, very motivating to people to understand that they could have a role to play in helping to support this effort. Okay, let's go to the next one. And then, do you have any other ideas related to water quality? You heard us talk about a lot of different things today related to monitoring and our criteria and things that we'll be working on and looking at throughout this periodic evaluation. So we just wanted to open it up for any sort of open-ended thoughts related to water quality. As someone in this basin who's a groundwater user, does water quality, are there other things related to water quality that maybe we didn't talk about today that are of interest to you or you have thoughts on? Maybe not on this one. Okay, we can move on. So I wanted to show this slide again before I ask the next question. You heard Trevor talking about these the proposed sustainable management criteria. So as a reminder, he said the thing to avoid was one or more additional production wells exceeds the regulatory threshold. The thing that we want to achieve, the condition we want to be operating under, is no additional production wells exceed regulatory thresholds. The way that we're going to measure that is our ability to meet anticipated demands in the urban water management plan. And just an important consideration that the wells that are already under an interim remedial action plan will not be a part of this sustainable management criteria. So thinking about that proposal as the way that we in this basin adjust our sustainable management criteria. Let's move to our next slide. We're going to ask you to give us your thoughts in two ways. Do you think that this approach addresses DWR's concern? You can slide the bar from strongly agree or strongly disagree to strongly agree or wherever you want in between. And then do you think, would you agree or disagree with the statement? It provides additional safeguards to improve sustainability. So when thinking about the approach that we're proposing here, do you think we're addressing DWR's comment, and do you think that this approach provides safeguards to groundwater? Where do you want us to mark here? All the way. All right, great. Well, that's reassuring. Great. Thank you guys so much for that feedback. I will also mention that we will leave this Menti poll unlocked maybe until Friday. If somebody wants to add an additional comment, you can. Probably the more effective way to send us a comment is to just shoot us an email. But if you have a great idea that could have come up today and you want to put it in here, you're certainly welcome to do that. But of course, you're also always welcome to just email us if you have additional thoughts or questions or anything you want to add. But we
Send
will-
that email to Laura.
Yeah, there's an email address for this team specifically, and we'll show it again towards the end, but also you can send it to
Can we
me.
get the presentation electronically?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that was a question too in the chat, so we can talk about that. Great. Okay, so then let's jump back to our PowerPoint. And did you want to close this up or do you want me to close this up?
You can close this out.
Great. Okay, so first of all, thanks again for being here. This is a very important part of our process. We really want to be working with our community as we do this periodic evaluation. So we've laid out a pretty detailed schedule for how we're going to do that. We had our first workshop. Some of you were there. Thank you. Thank you for being there. Today, obviously, is workshop number 2, which was focused on groundwater quality. The Groundwater Sustainability Board will be meeting throughout this process. Those are public open meetings where we'll be providing them with updates as well. So you can certainly listen in on those or come in person to any of those meetings. The next one of those is March 2nd. We'll be having another workshop like this on March 5th. And that workshop will be really focused on groundwater levels and interconnected surface water. So today we really focused on quality. We will be focused on groundwater levels and then surface water interconnection next meeting. So that'll be March 5th.
Kate,
Yes.
I think there's, March 5th is the date, but I see text underneath also that says GSA board meeting. I think that's a mistake. That's just a workshop. On
Yes.
March 5th.
Yes, I'm sure that that's just a workshop. Well, Laura, you've got the, let us know if we're wrong, Laura. Oh, no problem. Okay, the GSA board will meet again in a special meeting on March 23rd, which is why I'm pretty sure we don't have that meeting March 5th. And then our 4th workshop with this group in this type of setting will be May 4th. The GSA board will continue to meet through June and August, and then the periodic evaluation itself will be available for public review in September. There will be a special meeting related to this in November, and then the intent is to seek adoption of the periodic evaluation in December so that we can turn it in January and meet that January 2027 deadline. Next slide, please. So as a reminder, we really want to have participation like this, so please continue to attend our workshops. Please feel free to show up to the GSA board meetings, and we hope that you'll join us for the hearings in the fall. We will continue to update our website. We'll post materials there. We'll share information that we can for public comment in that place as well. But I'm also just going to ask, can you share with those you know? I think one of the things we're really hoping to get from this is community champions. So if you know other people who need to know about this or might have insight or information that they can share with us, please tell your friends, tell your colleagues, tell others. We want to have a really robust public process here, so really looking to spread the word. Local knowledge is very important in these processes, and we want to get as much of it as possible.
Can I jump in real
Yeah.
quick? I also wanted to mention, you know how to reach us. We'll go over the email again, but we've got a very aggressive schedule to prepare this periodic evaluation. So if you have comments on what you've seen tonight, and the slides will be available, given our aggressive schedule, we'd like any comments you have on this workshop in about 3 weeks or maybe 4 at tops. Each of these things build on each other, so that's why I asked. Thank you.
Yeah, good point, good point. Okay, great. So the next slide, information for our next workshop. So as mentioned, it's March 5th from 6 to 7:30. It will also be a hybrid, so you can register virtually to attend via Zoom if you're going to attend that way. Otherwise, we'll be in this room again. So however you best want to attend this, you're welcome to do so. We'd love to have you either way. And then I think we're just available for any last questions and answers, anything anybody else would like to cover today. So if you've got any questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat, and we're happy to facilitate any discussion. Or any questions in there.
All good.
Yeah, great.
I just want to comment that the copy of the slides will be on the GSA's website. So we'll put the recording of today's presentation plus the document. So you just go to the website and it'll be there by Monday for sure.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay. Are you seeing any comments in there?
No comment.
Well, we'll stick around for a few minutes in case anybody wants to pop a comment in. But again, here's our email address. So this email will reach this team. Again, if you have another idea, you have another thought, you have a question, a comment, please send us an email anytime. If you have any questions about upcoming workshops, you can reach us there as well. But I do want to emphasize that your participation is very valuable. Thank you very much for being here. Again, local knowledge is a very important part of this process, and so your time is very valued by our team. So thank you for joining us. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Katie.
My pleasure. Thanks. Okay, we'll just see if anybody pops a question in the chat, but I bet they're all on that.